All right, we've got breaking news. Here are the pictures from this church in Grand Blanc, Michigan. We've got new video. The Grand Blanc Township Police said there was an active shooter at the Church of Latter-day Saints there. There are multiple victims. They said the shooter is down, but the church, as you saw in that picture, is on fire.
There was a mass shooting that happened at a Mormon church in Grand Blanc, Michigan this weekend. In fact, there were 5 mass shootings this weekend. But I want to focus on the one in Michigan today because the president, the FBI director, and the attorney general all made statements on this shooting. And what I find most interesting about their statements is not what they said, but what they didn't say. I'm a former Army interrogator. I was trained to pay attention to the words that people use and the psychology behind those words. And I want to put my interrogator hat on to analyze the statements of the FBI director, the president, and the attorney general on this shooting. And what I'm going to reveal to you will shock you. But first, make sure you like the video, leave a comment as well, and after the video, if my analysis provides you some insight you didn't have before, please make sure you subscribe for more breakdowns just like this. So first, let's look at what the FBI director, Kash Patel, said on X. He said, "We are tracking reports of the horrific shooting and fire at an LDS church in Grand Blanc, Michigan. FBI agents are on the scene to assist local authorities." Now, it's interesting that Kash Patel himself is not on the scene because when there was a shooting at a campus in Utah that involved Charlie Kirk, he was there in person. Now it's just agents. So the death of one person versus what we're now hearing is 5 dead and 8 injured doesn't require his presence. To be fair, it's far more common that the FBI director doesn't pull up, but it's just worth showing the juxtaposition here, but I digress. The next part is far more important than that part anyway, so please pay attention. Violence in a place of worship is a cowardly and criminal act. Our prayers are with the victims and their families during this terrible tragedy. First of all, violence in any place is a cowardly act and a criminal act. But he chose to point out that it's a place of worship. And what he didn't say is ever so important. Watch this. What we heard after the Charlie Kirk shooting was that they attacked him because he's a Christian. They made his entire memorial this big Christian service, worshiping God, pyrotechnics, guest list from the White House, because it played into what I've already told you guys 1,000 times, the age-old narrative of the war on Christianity. You understand? I need everybody to understand what I'm saying here. The war on Christianity is so critically important to this administration's plot to usher in their fascist regime that no matter what, they're going to tie everything back to that. You don't have to believe me, but you better, because you're about to find out that the war on Christianity is the point. In this X post from Kash Patel, he said there was violence in a place of worship. This was an LDS church, by the way, not a Christian church that any of these Christian nationalists would attend, so he needed to sanitize it in a way to appeal to those Christian nationalists. Don't believe me? Let's look at what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump said, "I've been briefed on the horrendous shooting that took place in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think it's important that he spelled out LDS rather than said it, because saying Jesus Christ is a dog whistle on the war on Christianity for the Christian nationalist movement." Again, sanitizing it to ignore the difference in religious beliefs, but rather focusing on the similarities that open up to dog whistles. He goes on to say the FBI was immediately on the scene and we will be leading the federal investigation. The suspect is dead, but there's still a lot to learn. Interesting, because the last 2 shootings where the president was posting about them on Timu Twitter, they were immediately providing a lot of assumptions about the shooter, as well as leaking bits of evidence like writings on shell casings and potential motives. But right here he says there's a lot to learn. The last 2 shootings we heard it's a trans anti-fascist shooter, or we heard it was a radical left lunatic, or we heard it was a communist, socialist, trans radical, anti-fascist, feminist furry. We heard all that within 2 minutes of the shooting happening. But now the president says we have a lot to learn. Let's show some fucking patience here, guys. Don't want to jump to conclusions, right? Then he goes on to say this appears to be yet another targeted attack on Christians and the United States of America. This is the exact same language and the same type of dog whistles that Kash Patel used in his post on X. The president's using it in his post on Timu Twitter because, I'll say it again, the war on Christianity is the fucking point. Don't believe me still? Let's look at what Attorney General Pam Bondi said on X. She says, "I'm receiving briefings on what appears to be a horrific shooting and fire at an LDS church in Grand Blanc, Michigan. FBI and ATF agents are en route to the scene now. Let me take this opportunity to point out real briefly that all three of these statements seem to start off in a similar fashion and move in a similar fashion, almost like it was a coordinated messaging effort. She goes on to say, such violence in a place of worship is heartbreaking and chilling. Please join me in praying. Okay? In all three of their posts, it is place of worship, violence on Christians, pray, pray, pray. These are the words that Christian nationalists need to hear to justify their belief that there is a war on Christianity, to justify them shredding the Constitution, to justify ushering in fascism, to justify it because it's all in the name of stopping the violence against Christians. But listen, it's what they didn't say in these posts that's the most important part. It's the reality of this Grand Blanc shooter that exposes who they really are. Me analyzing their words, that matters. Me analyzing what they said has relevance. But what makes my analysis ever so relevant is the facts of this case. Let's pull up the picture of the truck that drove into the church just moments before the driver of that truck got out and started shooting. The first thing you're going to see is a double cab Chevrolet Z71 flying two American flags, because what's better than one American flag? Two American flags. Now, question one, does that scream communist, socialist, trans radical, feminist, furry, anti-fascist? No, we know what it screams. It screams my truck and my flags are my personality. It screams I've got to let you know that I'm a patriot because I burned the Constitution and wrapped myself up with the flag rather than wrapping myself in the Constitution and burning the flag. So we can guess right away who the shooter probably is. But here's the thing. Here's the crazy part. We don't have to guess. We already know who the shooter is. No nationwide manhunt, no Fox News speculation. We already know everything about him. Thomas Jacob Sanford, who I'm hearing is a Christian man who became angry, apparently, at the Mormon church. He's a 40-year-old conservative white guy with two giant American flags out the back of his double cab Chevrolet Z71 truck. And you want to know the kicker here? He wasn't just a conservative, he was a MAGA conservative. He wears shirts that say, "Make liberals cry again." He had a Trump 2024 poster on his front lawn. He wanted to ban abortion and take power away from Gretchen Whitmer. Now you tell me, is this a communist, socialist, trans radical, feminist, furry, anti-fascist? Or is this one of them? Now do you see why the president didn't bring up the shooter or the motive in his Temu tweet, and why he said we have a lot to learn, and why they all three just focused on the generic phrase violence on Christians? Because the truth of who he is highlights the things they intentionally didn't say. So to end this, we got to ask why. Why did they do this now and not before? Because before we even knew the name of the goddamn shooter in Utah, they already told us that he was a radical left lunatic with a trans partner who was a furry and wrote his entire motive on all these bullets. Which brings up my next question. What was the writings on the bullets in Grand Blanc, Michigan this weekend? Because the last time in Dallas, there was some anti-ICE writing on a bullet that somebody clearly put there after the fact in ballpoint pen, like we don't know it was made the fuck up. Where are the bullets of this shoot? The FBI loves to release the bullets with their made up transcriptions. And why now is there a lot to learn, but in the past few shootings, there wasn't a lot to learn? And why in the past few shootings, when we did learn more and we found out that what we learned was the opposite of their initial assumptions and conclusions, why did they never clarify that? You see why when you look at the statements from the president, the FBI director, and the attorney general. They are dog whistling to far-right Christian nationalists, to the far-right Christian nationalist movement. They are dog whistling to the war on Christianity. And what drives my point home in the same way that this conservative drove his truck into that church is that it was a conservative white guy that drove his truck into the church. So my point on the president, the FBI director, and the attorney general is it's not what you said as much as what you didn't say. If you cannot see that this is their agenda, if you cannot see that they are doing this on purpose, it's because you choose not to see. Let me draw a conclusion here that I'm afraid too many people are missing. Oftentimes when people like me get online and say things like this, it sounds like it's political pundit talk. It sounds like hyperbole, or maybe just exaggerating to be dramatic. But the very raw, real fact of the matter is they don't all three accidentally have damn near the same script in their post about this. They don't all three just accidentally use the same dog whistles. They didn't all three just accidentally leave out the American flag, the Z-71 truck, and the conservative white male identity. They did that shit on purpose. And if you don't understand, or at least start understanding, that they're doing that on purpose because they have an ulterior motive, a more devious plan. If you don't understand that right now, we are lost. The country's lost. Because people keep thinking that this is just political theater. It's not. It's political planning. They plan to rig the 2026 election. They plan to overthrow the Constitution. They plan to never cede power. This is not exaggeration. This is not me being dramatic. And every time that these horrific, violent mass shootings happen, and I send my condolences to every victim, every family member of all of them, but every time they happen, they jump on the opportunity to provide a narrative to the public that is in lockstep with their narrative of the war on Christianity. If you don't see it now, you may never see it. America, wake the fuck up.